Mr. President, may I just be allowed to ask some questions if our distinguished colleague would yield to some questions from this representation?
Please
Mr.
proceed. Please proceed.
Definitely, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, first of all, I would like to congratulate our dear colleague, our international law expert, our chairperson of the Committee on Justice, chairperson of the Committee on Blue Ribbon, Mr. President. And I'd like to place on record that I would like to associate myself with the statements made by Senator Tolentino, our Senate President pro tempore, Senator Legarda, and Senator Bato de la Rosa. And just to put on record, Mr. President, as Senator Bato de la Rosa is talking about bullying, I'd like to put on record what the dictionary is saying about bullying. Bully is a noun, a blustering, mean, or predatory person who, from a perceived position of relative power, intimidates, abuses, harasses, or coerces people, especially those considered unlikely to defend themselves. Mr. President, yung nakita ho nating video, kung hindi magngangalit ang mga Pilipino dun sa video na yon, baka hindi na tayo Pilipino, Mr. President. I would just like to put on record, Mr. President, kahit saang lupalop ng daigdig ka magpunta, bullying po yun. Nakakasama po ng loob na i-deny pa po ng embahada ng China na ito ay hindi nangyari. So, ang unang tanong ko, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, ito po bang lugar na pinangyarihan ng video na ito ay lugar na pinagtatalunan kung ito ay sa atin o sa kanila, Mr. President, distinguished colleague?
Mr. President, the arbitral ruling is clear. That place is part of our territorial sea. It is within the 12 nautical miles area adjacent to Pag-asa Islands. Clay 1 is, as the video, the picture showed, is merely 1.9 nautical miles. Kitang-kita na po yun kung saan nangyari. So, the 1.9 definitely is within the 12 nautical mile.
So it's not even in question, Mr. President. Walang question, klarong-klaro na ito ay nasa loob ng Philippine territory. Is that correct, Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. President.
Crystal clear. Mr. President, gusto ko lang pong isulat sa talaan ng bulwagang ito that I am in full support of this resolution that we are talking about, initially introduced by our Senate President pro tempore and our Senate President. But I will also put on record that I wanted to ask for an executive session from our armed forces of the Philippines so we can find out what else we can do. And I'm not going to discuss it for obvious reasons, Mr. President, what else we can do, Mr. President, to empower our armed forces of the Philippines. It's disgusting, Mr. President, and just looking at the video and being in a position where we can help our people, not only our fisher folks, but also our men in uniform, na ang iba po sa kanila ay narito, Mr. President. Let's find out how we can help, what we can do, Mr. President, and pakita natin, Mr. President, na maaring din natin pantayan, Mr. President, ang kanilang lakas militar. Ngunit, Mr. President, yung ating masidhing pagnanais para tumayo, para ipaglaban ang soberenya, ang teritoryo ng ating nag-iisa at pinakamamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Wala hong tao sa mundo dito, Mr. President, na makaka-question ito sa atin, lalo na sa mga Pilipinong ninanais mabuhay ng matiwasay, ninanais na magkaroon ng kapayapaan sa ating Asian neighbors, Mr. President. Mr. President, another question that I'd like to raise to our good friend and the chairperson of the Committee on Justice, whom we considered as one of our brilliant international law expert, is how many of our diplomatic protests have been resolved? We have been hearing a lot of diplomatic protests, Mr. President. May we know from our distinguished colleagues, how many of our diplomatic protests have been resolved? Have we received any response from China because as mentioned a while ago, dito sa insidenteng ito, napakaklaro, nandun yung mga Chinese vessels, nandun yung kanilang bandila, nandun yung nakasulat mismo yung kanilang bansa. Pero idinideny po nila, Mr. President.
From my recollection, Mr. President, I think we would now total 400. 400
Note
400.
verbal.
since
Note
the start
verbal,
of all, through the
diplomatic
years,
protest. Yes.
Mr. President. So I'm not privy to the results. Even the calling of the ambassador based here has been done. Protests within the United Nations system structure done. So these are continuing. But for this issue, I think just we have one after this incident.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you for that. If I'm not mistaken, the Department of Foreign Affairs made a statement just recently, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Your Honor, distinguished colleague, that just for this current administration, we have had 61 protests, Mr. President. 61. I just would like to know what is the status of this protest? Meron na po bang naresolba kahit isa dito sa 61 protests na ito during this early administration, Mr. President? If we can get that data, Mr. President, we would be happy to know what we can do and how else we can help our DFA officials, etc. And I would just like to put on record, Mr. President, that the continuous presence of Chinese structures in the West Philippine Sea, despite our arbitration victory in 2016, endangers, Mr. President, not only our territorial sovereignty, but also our food security as well. Would like to emphasize, Mr. President, the breadth and depth of this issue in terms of fisheries alone, fisheries resources. As of 2020, 7% of our total fisheries production, or 323,312 metric tons of aquatic products were sourced from the West Philippine Sea. Thousands of subsistence fishers from Ilocos Region, Central Luzon, Mimaropa, and parts of the National Capital Region benefit from this vast body of water. And lastly, Mr. President, in terms of coral reefs, the coral reefs in the Philippine Sea cover an estimated area of 4,640 square kilometers, or 30% of the total reef of our country. Per the U.S. National Ocean Service, coral reefs are important to maintain marine life as it provides the ecosystems in which thousands of marine species thrive. I just wanted to put that on record, Mr. President, and again thank the distinguished gentleman from Cavite for his courage and devotion in raising this very concerning issue. And I think all of us are in unison, Mr. President, in supporting not only our men in uniform, but our fisher folks as well. And as a nation, Mr. President, we wanted to send this message to this bullying country that they will never be able to bully us. Thank you, Mr. President.